Okay, we are going to do, now we're going to look at 3.1. So, hopefully you have completed your first exam and you're ready to start with a brand new chapter, 3.1. In 3.1, we're going to be graphing lines. We're going to be doing all kinds of things with lines. So in order to be able to facilitate that, I need to make sure that you are comfortable that we have reviewed what it is to graph points. This is what we call the Cartesian plane, okay? It's called the Cartesian plane after Rene Descartes, who came up with it, okay? The center here is called the origin. You have an x-axis and a y-axis. This is the positive side of the x-axis. This is the negative side. This is the positive side of the y-axis, and this is the negative side. Every point on this graph has an x and a y coordinate. This one right in the middle that I called the origin is at 0, 0. Okay? That is at 0 for x and 0 for y. If I wanted to graph 3, 2, the first number is always your x. The second number is always your y. So the x number is saying a positive 3. So you always start at the origin. You go over 1, 1, 2, 3, and then up positive y, 1, 2. So the point would be here. I made those little lines to show you where I was jumping and moving to, okay? What about positive 4, negative 1? Well, starting back at the origin, you would go over 1, 2, 3, positive 4 for x, and down 1, negative for the y. So that's at positive 4, negative 1. Okay? Something else, what if I had negative 5, positive 6? Okay? Negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then up 6, which if you go up 6 to y, you're up here. So negative 5, 6. Okay? If you have a point on the x or y axis, think about it. Which way did I go for the x? Did I go either this way or this way on the x? Nope, I didn't. So my x number is 0. And then what did I do? What did I do to go down for the, or what did I do for the y? I went down 1, 2. So I'm at 0, negative 2. Okay? With that in mind, you are expected to have some idea of the Cartesian plane and how to graph. So my next question then is, what's different? We've done equations. Equal sign means equations, means I solve for x. But now I also have a y. I have two variables. So I'm going to have two answers. I'm going to have an x answer, and I'm going to have a y answer. In this case, if I could say x is 1 and y is 4. If x was 1 and y was 4, do I get 5? Yes. What else could I say? Well, I could say x was 2 and y was 3. I could say x was 3 and y was 2. I could say x was negative 1 and y was positive 6. I could say x was 0 and y was 5. I could say x was 5 and y was 0. I could go on and on and on. How many possible answers are there to this equation? An infinite amount. There's more than you could possibly, you'd have a job for the rest of your life if you had to write down all the possible answers. So when you get an equation that has two variables, you don't write down the answers. You do something else. And what I want you to realize is, if I were to take all of these answers, which are in the form of coordinate points, and I were to graph all of these points, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think it's going to look like? Well, 1, 4 is here. 2, 3, 3, 2. -1, 6. 0, 5. 5, 0. If my graph were, I'm terrible. If my graph were drawn the way it should be, what you're going to find out is that all your points are in a straight line. Okay, it's just mine are terrible. My graph isn't perfect, okay? They all create a straight line. So when you have an equation that looks like this, you can't just say the answer is 1, 4, or the answer is 2, 3, or the answer is infinity. You say this is the answer, because any point on this line would work in this equation. In other words, what if I said 6 and -1? Well, if you go over 6 and down -1, it's going to be on the line. No matter what you get, it's going to be on that line if it works in the equation. Okay? So that's why you graph when you are given this type of equation. Okay? Now, they're going to do a couple things. They're going to give you things like 2x plus 3y equals 6. And then they're going to ask you to fill in the blank. Okay, so they want us to fill in the blank. They're saying, remember, this is always x and this is y. If x is 0, what's y? If x is 0, what's y? So, in other words, I'm going to put in a 0 for x. So I get 0 plus 3y equals 6, which is just 3y equals 6. Divide by 3, y is 2. So in this case, my answer, y is 2 when x is 0. But then what about if x is -3? Okay, again, you're putting in another number for x. So if x is -3, I get -6 plus 3y equals 6. I add 6 to both sides, and I get 3y equals 12. I divide by 3, and I get y is 4. So here, when x is -3, y is 4. Well, now they want to know find x when y is 0. So take 2x plus 3 times y equals 6, and instead of y, we're putting a 0. So we get 2x plus 0 equals 6, which is just 2x equals 6. Divide by 2, you get x is 3. So when y is 0, x is 3. And plug in the -4. 2x plus 3 times, and we want it to be -4. So that's 2x minus 12. 3 times -4 is -12, equals 6. Add the 12 to both sides, you get 2x equals 18. Divide by 2, and you get x is 9. So x is 9 when y is -4. They're going to give you the equation, and then they're going to ask you to find the missing either x or y. Okay. Now, I want you to think back when I showed you the Cartesian plane. We talked about the fact that there could be points that are on the actual axes, meaning I could have a point here. I could have a point here. I could have a point here. I could have a point right here. Let's figure out their coordinate. The first point, let's see, 1, 2, 3. This is at 3, 0, because you have to move over 3 on the x, but none on the y. The one up here is 0, 2, because you have to move up 2. You move none on the x, but up 2 on the y. This one is at -1, 0. because you move over -1 on the x, you don't go up and down on the y. And this one is at 0, -4, because you move down on the y-axis, but you don't move right or left on the x-axis. I want you to notice something. If it is on, if it, meaning a point, is on the x-axis, the y-coordinate number is equal to 0. Notice that? If the point is on the y-axis, the x number is equal to 0. Any point on the x or y-axis has a special name, and it is called an intercept. It's a point that is either an x-intercept on the x-axis or a y-intercept on the y-axis. And the uniqueness is an x-intercept, meaning it's on the x-axis. Remember, the y number is always equal to 0. And for a y-intercept, meaning it's on the y-axis, the x number is always equal to 0. You need to know that, because they are going to give you specific problems that look like this. They're going to say, okay, 4x minus y equals -3. Find the x and y intercepts. Meaning, if x is 0, what's y? And if y is 0, what's x? That's what they're saying. That's what they mean by the intercept. So if x was 0, I'd have -y equals -3, because that would be gone. Divide out the -1, and you get 3. There's the x. Sorry, this is the y-intercept because x is 0. Now, what is the x-intercept? Make y equals to 0. 4x minus 0 equals -3. So 4x equals -3. Divide by 4, and x is -3/4. That's the x-intercept. When they ask you for x and y intercepts, they're asking you to make x equal to 0 and solve for y, make y equal to 0 and solve for x. They're asking for the points that are on the x and the y axis, called the intercepts. All right, let's try one again. Let's do one more like that. So if I gave you 2x minus y equals 4, and I asked you to find the x and y intercepts, it said find x and y intercepts. They are saying make y equal to 0 and find x, make x equal to 0 and find y. So if I make x equal to 0, I get -y equals 4. I divide out the -1, and I get y is -4. That's when x is 0, y is -4. And the other one is make y equal to 0. So I have 2x minus 0 equals 4. So I just have 2x equals 4. Divide by 2, and I get x is 2. X-intercept, y-intercept. Okay? So that's what they mean when they say find the x and y intercept. It's just setting each one equal to 0 and solve. Now, the only other thing that's in 3.1 is we do have special lines. We have something called horizontal lines, and we have vertical lines. Horizontal lines are y equals any number. So y equals 5, y equals -2, y equals 1/2, y equals -6, y equals 8, y equals 0. Okay? Horizontal lines just have y in the equation. meaning, and this is how easy it is to graph it, if y equals 5, that means 5 is a horizontal line going through 5. If y equals -2, you find -2, the horizontal line going through -2. Y equals 1/2, find 1/2, it's a horizontal line going through 1/2. Y equals -6, 2, 3, 4, 5, you find -6, and it's a horizontal line going through -6. That's it. So then, I did it. I unmuted myself. Let me get another board here. If I have vertical lines, they are x equals any number. So x equals 5, x equals 2, x equals -3, x equals -1. Finding those numbers on the x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's x equals 5. Don't laugh at me. Vertical line going through 5. X equals 2. Vertical line going through 2. X equals -3. Vertical line that actually goes through -3. I'm just going to make there you go. X equals -1. Vertical line going through -1. Okay, that was the axis, right? That was the y-axis. So vertical lines only have x equals in their equation, and they go through that axis, through that axis. Now, they are going to ask you, let's go back. When I said 4x minus y equals -3, and I said to find the intercepts, and let's do it again. It's where you make x equal to 0, so you get -y equals -3, divide by -1, y is 3, and make y equal to 0. So you get 4x equals -3, divide by 4, and x is -3/4. They're also going to ask you to graph it. The definition of the line is running through 2 points. You need 2 points to create a line. So we can take these 2 points, 0, 3, and -3/4, 0. And if we connect them, we have the line that represents all the answers that go into our equation. That's the answer. That is the solution to our equation. This line is the solution to the equation, 4x minus y equals -3. Any point on that line will work in that equation. So they are going to ask you to graph just by plotting the 2 points. Earlier we had 2x plus 3y equals 6, and you were given, let's see, 0, and you had to find that, and -3, and you had to find that. So let me go back. 2 times 0 plus 3y equals 6, so 3y equals 6, divide by 3, and y is 2. And then 2 times -3 plus 3y equals 6, so -6 plus 3y equals 6. Add 6 to both sides, you get 3y equals 12. Divide by 3, and you get y is 4. They will ask you to graph the equation. So you graph the 2 points that you found, which are 0, 2, and -3, 4. You connect those 2 dots, you have a line, and you have the line that represents all the answers in that equation. So they are going to ask you to be finding points, and then they're going to ask you to graph it as well. Okay? And that's 3.1. That's 3.1 in a nutshell. Now, if you got to this again, congratulations. I mean, means you finished your first exam, and you're ready to move on. So you're a third of the way through. That's great. All right. You have a good week. Contact me with any questions you might have, and I look forward to hearing from you. Okay? Have a good week.